In December 2016, 19-year-old Sarah Stern from New Jersey vanished under chilling circumstances. Her abandoned car was discovered the next morning on the Route 35 bridge with the engine running, a scene that initially led some to believe she might have jumped to her death. However, a deeper investigation revealed a far more sinister truth. Sarah's childhood friend, Leah McAtasney, had orchestrated her murder to steal money she had recently inherited. McAtasney, along with accomplice and former roommate Preston Taylor, lured Sarah under the guise of routine familiarity. In a premeditated plot that prosecutors say McAtasney had been planning for months, he strangled Sarah at her home, stole approximately $10,000 from her safe, and then convinced Taylor to help dispose of her body by dumping it into the Shark River through Belmar Bridge. The body itself was never recovered. A break in the case came from a covert recording Anthony Curry, a friend of McAtasney's, secretly captured him admitting, "It took me half an hour to kill her," and chillingly describing it as a timed act, driven by greed. Curry's testimony and the recorded confession formed a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. In February 2019, a jury found McAtasney guilty on 7 counts, including first-degree murder, conspiracy, and desecration of remains. In June 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years for desecrating the remains. Preston Taylor, who pled guilty to robbery, conspiracy, disturbing human remains, evidence tampering, and hindering apprehension, testified for the prosecution. As part of his plea deal, the felony murder charge was dropped and he received an 18-year prison sentence, with eligibility for parole after 13 years. At his sentencing, Taylor expressed remorse, but Sarah's father, Michael Stern, expressed deep anguish. "I don't want to hear anything from him." Though Sarah's body was never found, her memory lives on through her father's scholarship in her name and the haunting legacy of a life ended by someone she once considered a friend. On November 20th, 2015, in the Wakefield neighborhood of the Bronx, Ashley Wade, then 22, invited her longtime friend Angelique Sutton, who was approximately 8.5 months pregnant and on her wedding day, to her apartment under the pretense of giving her a gift. When Sutton arrived, Wade brutally attacked her, slashing her throat and repeatedly stabbing her neck and abdomen to prevent her from yelling for help. After fatally wounding Sutton, Wade surgically removed the unborn baby using a 3-inch knife and wrapped the newborn in a blanket, claiming the child as her own. The infant, later named Genesis Bradley by the victim's family, survived and was present in court when Wade was sentenced. Following a graphic and highly publicized trial in early October 2017, during which prosecutors presented intense photographic evidence and testimony from medical experts diagnosing Wade with pseudocyesis, a psychological condition where a person believes they are pregnant, she was found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of kidnapping. In November 2017, Judge Margaret Clancy sentenced Wade to 25 years to life for murder, plus an additional 15 years for kidnapping, to be served consecutively, resulting in a total sentence of 40 years to life in prison. The case devastated both families and shocked the nation, with a candlelit vigil held in Sutton's memory where loved ones described her as always so joyful and laughing. During sentencing, prosecutors emphasized the calculated nature of the crime, noting that Wade meticulously planned the murder on her friend's wedding day, went to great lengths to disguise her own deception, and attempted to steal an infant for personal gain. Today, Genesis lives with Sutton's relatives, a living testament to the tragic loss and an enduring bond between mother and child. Martine Vik Magnussen was a 23-year-old Norwegian business student whose tragic death in London in March 2008 remains unresolved. On the night of March 14, 2008, Martine was last seen leaving the exclusive Maddox nightclub in Mayfair with Faruk Abdulhack, a fellow student at Regent's Business School and the son of a wealthy Yemeni family. Her body was discovered 2 days later, hidden under rubble in the basement of Abdulhack's apartment building on Great Portland Street. A post-mortem examination revealed that she had been and strangled. Abdulhack fled the UK shortly after her death, first traveling to Egypt and then to Yemen, where he remains beyond the reach of British authorities due to the lack of an extradition treaty between the UK and Yemen. In March 2023, Abdulhack communicated with BBC journalist Nawal Al-Maghafi, stating that Martine's death was the result of a sex accident gone wrong. He expressed regret over the incident but has not returned to the UK to face justice. Despite an international arrest warrant and efforts by Martine's family and British authorities, Abdulhack remains at large. Martine's father, Odd Petter Magnussen, has tirelessly campaigned for justice, appealing to the UK government and international bodies to secure his daughter's killer's extradition. He has highlighted how wealth and political influence can obstruct justice, emphasizing the need for accountability regardless of the perpetrator's status. Jessica Kamala Wongso was convicted of murdering her close friend, Wayan Mirna Salihin, in a highly publicized case in Indonesia. On January 6, 2016, the two met at the upscale Olivier Cafe in Jakarta, where Jessica arrived early and was caught on CCTV placing a shopping bag near Myrna's seat. When Myrna arrived and drank the Vietnamese iced coffee that Jessica had ordered for her, she collapsed almost immediately. A toxicology report confirmed that the drink had been laced with a lethal dose of cyanide. Authorities quickly turned their attention to Jessica due to her suspicious behavior captured on camera and her alleged motive: jealousy and unresolved resentment after Myrna advised her to break off a previous relationship. Jessica was arrested just days later and charged with premeditated murder. Her trial in mid-2016 became a national spectacle, televised live and followed intensely across Indonesia. On October 27, 2016, she was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison. She appealed her conviction, but all attempts were rejected by the High Court and the Supreme Court. After serving 8 years, Jessica was released on parole in August 2024, having received sentence remissions for good behavior. However, her parole terms require her to remain in Jakarta under supervision until 2032. Heidi Brousard, a 33-year-old mother from Austin, Texas, was tragically murdered in December 2019 by her longtime friend, Megan Firamuska. Firamuska, 37, had been friends with Brousard for over a decade, having met at church camp. The two women had discussed being pregnant together, even considering the possibility of giving birth on the same day. On December 12, 2019, Brousard dropped off her older child at school and was last seen returning home with her newborn daughter, Margot Carey. Later that day, Firamuska abducted Brousard, strangling her with a dog leash, and placed her body in the trunk of her car. She then drove to her home in the Houston area, where she attempted to pass off the infant as her own. Firamuska had previously convinced friends and family that she was pregnant, despite there being no evidence of an actual pregnancy. The case drew significant public attention, and after an extensive investigation, Firamuska was arrested. In February 2023, she pleaded guilty to the murder of Heidi Brousard and was sentenced to 55 years in prison. As part of the plea agreement, Firamuska waived her right to appeal, bringing some closure to the families involved. In August 2013, 20-year-old Renee Marsden, a young woman described by loved ones as fun-loving, bubbly, and honest, tragically ended her life by jumping from a cliff at Watson's Bay in Sydney. What appeared to be a heartbreaking suicide soon revealed itself to be the result of an insidious catfishing campaign. Renee had been emotionally entangled for nearly 2 years with a fabricated persona, Braden Spiteri, purportedly a prisoner in Goulburn jail. Over 11,000 text messages had been exchanged, along with wedding plans, phone bills, and even a tattoo of his name. A coronial inquest later confirmed that Kamala Zaydan, Renee's former close friend and ex-girlfriend, had orchestrated the deception. Zaydan used the alias Braden to construct a relationship that manipulated Renee's emotions and eroded her mental well-being. The coroner condemned Zaydan's actions as a profound betrayal, nothing but a pack of lies, and highlighted her repeated dishonesty during the inquiry. Evidence presented during the inquest revealed disturbing signs of emotional abuse, including threats like, "I'll hunt you down," screenshots of messages, and testimony that Zaydan had physically harassed Renee and followed her when she began dating someone else. Despite this, catfishing remains a legal gray area in New South Wales, and Zaydan was not charged criminally. The coroner recommended further legal review, prompting Renee's parents, Mark and Teresa, to campaign for a so-called Renee's Law to criminalize coercive online deception. On July 31st, 2022, 17-year-old Mackenzie Sharilla intentionally crashed her car into a brick wall at 100 miles per hour in Strongsville, Ohio, resulting in the deaths of her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and their friend, Davion Flanagan. Sharilla, who had illegal substances in her system, showed no attempt to brake before the crash. The event was captured on surveillance footage and analyzed through the car's event data recorder, confirming the deliberate nature of the crash. In August 2023, Sharilla was convicted of multiple charges, including murder and aggravated vehicular homicide. The judge described her actions as controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful, stating, "This was not reckless driving. This was murder." During her arrest, body cam footage revealed Sharilla expressing concern about her bracelet being damaged, displaying a lack of remorse. At her sentencing, she read a statement apologizing to the victims' families, stating, "I hope one day you can see I would never let this happen or do it on purpose. I wish I could remember what happened." Sharilla was sentenced to 2 concurrent 15 years to life terms with eligibility for parole after 15 years. The judge noted that, based on her conduct, it was likely she would serve a significant portion of her sentence. In March 2015, 18-year-old Brittany Gargle was found strangled to death near a landfill outside Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Her best friend, 21-year-old Cheyenne Rose Antoine, became the prime suspect. Crucially, police discovered Brittany's body alongside a belt, the very same belt Cheyenne was wearing in a selfie posted on Facebook just hours before the tragedy. This tiny but telling detail unraveled Antoine's initial alibi. She had claimed they parted ways after visiting bars, while Brittany went with another man, but the Facebook evidence placed her at the scene with the murder weapon. Investigators reconstructed the night's events using social media timelines and a crucial tip. Cheyenne allegedly confessed to a friend in the early hours, admitting that she had hit and strangled Brittany following an alcohol-fueled argument. After initially facing second-degree murder charges, she ultimately pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a 7-year prison sentence in January 2018. During sentencing, defense lawyers highlighted her troubled upbringing, including foster care and abuse, while the Crown emphasized her deliberate efforts to mislead investigators, including false alibis and social media manipulation. Shamria Jalisa Fletcher, affectionately known as Mimi, was a 34-year-old woman from Atlanta, Georgia, whose life was tragically cut short on March 2, 2022. She was found dead in her townhouse on Piedmont Avenue in Atlanta's Sono neighborhood. An autopsy confirmed that her cause of death was manual strangulation. Okasha Moria Range, Fletcher's close friend and roommate, was arrested and charged with murder and aggravated assault in connection with Fletcher's death. Prosecutors presented evidence suggesting that Range had a controlling and manipulative relationship with Fletcher, including allegations that she faked illnesses to maintain control over her. A former roommate testified that Range was very controlling of Fletcher, often drawing attention to times she was sick and behaving strangely when Fletcher's friends were around. Despite Range's defense attorney's claims that she had real illnesses, the prosecution argued that these behaviors were part of a pattern of manipulation. During the trial, Range claimed that she and Fletcher had been play fighting when Fletcher was accidentally injured. However, prosecutors contended that Range had beaten Fletcher and then strangled her to death. The jury found Range guilty of murder, and she was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Her attorney indicated intentions to appeal the conviction and file a motion for a new trial. Yasmin Martin, a 19-year-old from Sunderland, England, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for causing the death of her close friend, Mia Marsh, through dangerous driving. The incident occurred on December 2, 2022, when Martin, who had consumed alcohol and was nearly double the legal drink-drive limit, drove a Vauxhall Astra she had never driven before. She was taking 3 friends home after a night out in Sunderland. Despite pleas from passengers, including Mia, to slow down, Martin accelerated, reaching speeds of over 70 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone. She lost control on a bend and crashed into a crash barrier, resulting in Mia's death from a significant head injury. None of the passengers were wearing seatbelts at the time. Martin initially claimed her drink had been spiked, but later admitted to her actions. In addition to her prison sentence, Martin was banned from driving for 5 years upon release. Mia's family expressed profound grief, describing the loss as unimaginable and noting that Mia's injuries were so severe that a closed coffin was required for her funeral. In June 2019, 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman was brutally murdered in what became one of Alaska's most disturbing criminal cases. Cynthia, who had developmental disabilities, believed she was going on a hike at Thunderbird Falls in Chugiak with her best friend, 18-year-old Denali Bremer, and another teen 16-year-old Caden McIntosh. However, the outing was a premeditated trap. Bremer had been catfished online by a 21-year-old Indiana man named Darren Showmiller, who posed as a wealthy individual named Tyler. He promised Bremer $9 million in exchange for photos and videos of a murder being committed. Motivated by the false promise of money and reportedly jealousy over a boy, Bremer conspired with McIntosh and others, including Caleb Leland, to carry out the killing. On the day of the crime, the teens lured Cynthia off the hiking trail under the pretense of friendship. They bound her with duct tape, and Caden McIntosh shot her execution style in the back of the head. They then dumped her body into the Eklutna River and attempted to destroy evidence by disposing of her belongings in a nearby park. Meanwhile, Bremer took photos and videos of the crime scene and sent them to Showmiller to fulfill his grotesque request. The investigation quickly unraveled the plot after Cynthia's body was discovered and Bremer began to confess details to police. Denali Bremer was charged with first-degree murder, among other counts. She pleaded guilty in February 2023. In addition to state charges, Bremer also faced federal child charges after it was revealed she had taken explicit photos of a minor at Showmiller's request. She was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison in March 2024. Then, in February 2024, an Alaska state judge sentenced her to 99 years in prison without the possibility of parole for Cynthia's murder. The murder of 16-year-old Jason Sweeney, a construction worker from Philadelphia, occurred on May 30th, 2003. He was brutally killed by 4 teenagers, including his own girlfriend and best friend, with the primary motive being to steal his paycheck. This violent crime, involving young perpetrators who showed little remorse, drew significant national attention. The incident began when Justina Morley, Sweeney's 15-year-old girlfriend, lured him to a wooded area known as the Trails near the Delaware River, pretending it was a date. Unbeknownst to Sweeney, Morley had been involved with 2 16-year-olds, Nicholas Koya and Edward Batzig Jr., with Batzig also being Sweeney's best friend. Nicholas's 17-year-old brother, Dominic Koya, was also part of the plan. Once Sweeney arrived, Batzig started the attack, repeatedly hitting Sweeney in the head. The Koya brothers and Batsig then continued the brutal attack, striking Sweeney with a hatchet, a hammer, and a rock until he died. As a final horrific act, they dropped a large boulder on his head. After the murder, they stole his $500 paycheck, shared a group hug, and then used the stolen money to buy jewelry and drugs. The police investigation revealed that the murder was not a spontaneous act, but had been planned days in advance. The group even listened to the Beatles' song, Helter Skelter, repeatedly as part of their preparation for the crime. Joshua Staub, a friend of Dominic Koya, testified that the group had bragged about their plan to kill Sweeney, using Morley as bait, and that Batsig knew Sweeney would have his paycheck on him. Although the perpetrators were known to be addicts, they were sober at the time of the murder. A detective and a forensic psychologist later suggested that envy and resentment of Sweeney's success might have been additional motives beyond just the robbery. In terms of legal proceedings and sentencing, Justina Morley pleaded guilty to third-degree murder in exchange for her testimony against the others. She was sentenced to 17.5 to 35 years in prison and was released on parole in December 2020. Dominic Koya, Nicholas Koya, and Edward Batsig Jr. were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, robbery, and possessing an instrument of crime. They were tried as adults and were all convicted in May 2005. Each received mandatory life sentences without parole for the murder charge, along with additional years for the other crimes. None of the teenagers showed any remorse at their sentencing. Due to a 2012 Supreme Court ruling regarding juvenile offenders, Nicholas Koya and Edward Batsig Jr. were granted resentencing hearings. However, in 2015, Nicholas Koya's original sentence of life without parole was upheld. The murder of Bobby Kent, a 20-year-old American man, occurred on July 14, 1993, in Weston, Florida. He was killed by 7 people, including his best friend, Martin Joseph Marty Puccio Jr. This shocking crime later became the basis for the 2001 film Bully. The troubled relationship between Kent and Puccio was a key factor leading to the murder. Kent frequently bullied and abused Puccio. Puccio's parents were concerned about the injuries he sustained from Kent, while Kent's father saw Puccio as a bad influence. The situation worsened when Puccio started dating Lisa Connolly. Connolly became very frustrated with how Kent treated Puccio and his constant presence in their lives. She was also pregnant with Puccio's child and decided that Kent needed to be eliminated permanently, beginning discussions about his murder with Puccio and other friends. On July 13, 1993, Connolly falsely told Alice Willis that Kent planned to kill her and her baby, urging Willis to return to Broward County to conspire against Kent. Willis, along with her boyfriend Donald Semenick and Heather Swallers, met with Connolly. An initial attempt to murder Kent at a construction site failed because Connolly couldn't bring herself to shoot him. Seeking help, Connolly contacted Derek Kaufman, who claimed to be a hitman. The group, which also included Connolly's cousin Derek Zverko, finalized their plan to kill Kent the following night with Kaufman's assistance. On the night of July 14, 1993, the 7 conspirators gathered at Puccio's house, armed with 2 knives, a lead pipe, and a baseball bat. They picked up Kent, convincing him to join them by saying they would race cars and that Willis wanted to have sleep with him. At a construction site, Willis and Swallers distracted Kent, which allowed Semenick to stab him in the back of the neck. When Kent turned to Puccio for help, Puccio then stabbed him in the stomach. As Kent tried to run away, Puccio continued to stab him, eventually cutting his throat and hitting his head against the ground. Kaufman delivered the final, fatal blow with a baseball bat. Afterward, Zverko, Semenick, Puccio, and Kaufman dumped Kent's body in a marsh, hoping that alligators would consume it, thus disposing of the evidence. Following the murder, several of the people involved confessed. Connolly admitted her role to her mother, who, along with Zverko's mother, contacted their brother, Joe Scrima, who had connections with the police. Scrima then connected them with Detective Frank Ilaraza. Zverko confessed everything to Detective Ilaraza and led him to Bobby Kent's body, which was crucial for the investigation. Of the 7 perpetrators, 3 received life sentences: Martin Puccio, Donald Semenick, and Derek Kaufman. Puccio's initial death sentence was later overturned and reduced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The other 4, Lisa Connolly, Alice Willis, Derek Zverko, and Heather Swallers, were all released from prison by February 2004. Their sentences were reduced due to appeals, or for cooperating with the police investigation. The murder of Bobby Kent has been extensively covered, being documented in the true crime book Bully, a true story of high school revenge, and featured in various television shows. The murder of Michelle Yvette Missy Avila, an American teenager, occurred in October 1985 at the hands of her former best friends, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. The primary reasons for the murder stem from intense jealousy, particularly from Severson, who reportedly became envious of Avila's growing popularity and physical attractiveness. Both Severson and Doyle also accused Avila of having romantic relationships with their boyfriends, fueling their resentment. The events leading to her death began on October 1, 1985, when Michelle Avila went out with Laura Doyle. 3 days later, on October 4th, 1985, Avila's body was tragically discovered in Big Tahunga Canyon, located within the Angeles National Forest. Forensic examination revealed that she had been forcibly drowned in just 6 inches of water. Additionally, her hair had been cut, and a 4-foot-long log was placed on her body, presumably to keep her submerged. Initially, the investigation faced significant challenges. Law enforcement had no immediate leads, and as a result, the case went cold for nearly 3 years. However, a crucial breakthrough occurred in July 1988 when Eva Kairumbalo came forward with vital information. Her testimony provided the necessary details to reopen the case and directly led to the arrest of Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. During the legal proceedings, prosecutors outlined their case, explaining that Severson and Doyle had lured Avila to a secluded creek. There, they confronted her about what they perceived as her promiscuity and accused her of ruining their relationships. The confrontation escalated violently, with the 2 perpetrators physically holding Avila's face down in the water. To ensure she remained submerged and to prevent her from surfacing, they placed a heavy log on her body. In March 1990, both Karen Severson and Laura Doyle were found guilty of second-degree murder. The jury's decision for a second-degree conviction, rather than first-degree, indicated that they did not believe the murder was premeditated or planned in advance, but rather occurred in the heat of the moment. As a consequence of their conviction, both women were sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Karen Severson was eventually released in December 2011, having served approximately 21 and a half years of her sentence. Laura Doyle followed a year later, being released in December 2012 after serving 22 years. Tori Mache Lang, affectionately known as Kiwi, was an 18-year-old honor student from Lithonia, Georgia, whose life was tragically cut short in July 2021. Lang had recently graduated from Stevenson High School and was pursuing a degree in architectural engineering. On July 28, 2021, her body was discovered under a tree in Yellow River Park, Gwinnett County, with a gunshot wound to the head. Her car, a 2012 Nissan Versa, was found a week later, burned and abandoned at Hidden Acres Nature Preserve in DeKalb County, approximately 5 miles from the park. Austin Tiber Ford, a 20-year-old man from Lithonia, was arrested and charged with felony murder, aggravated assault, voluntary manslaughter, and other related offenses in connection with Lang's death. Ford, who had been a friend of Lang, was accused of shooting her and then concealing her death by burning her car and abandoning it in a wooded area. The case went to trial twice, with both trials resulting in mistrials due to hung juries unable to reach a unanimous verdict on the murder charges. The defense argued that Lang's death was a suicide, citing the medical examiner's inability to definitively determine the manner of death. However, prosecutors contended that Ford's actions, such as removing the firearm and vehicle from the scene and providing conflicting statements, suggested involvement in her death. Following the mistrials, Ford was convicted on lesser charges, including theft by taking and concealing the death of another. In August 2023, he was sentenced to 20 years, with the first 10 years to be served in prison and the remaining 10 years on probation. Additionally, he was ordered to have no contact with Lang's family. On the evening of July 31, 2018, in Gateshead, England, friends Daniel Smith, age 20 and already a father, and Jonathan Carr, 21, were drinking and using substances at Jonathan's flat along with Daniel's cousin, Stephen Morrison. A disagreement erupted between Daniel and Jonathan, during which Daniel became aggressive following a punch thrown outside. In a sudden and violent escalation, Smith seized a kitchen knife and stabbed Jonathan in the chest. Jonathan died from the wound, leaving Daniel to flee the scene by nightfall. The next morning, overwhelmed by guilt, Daniel confessed to his mother that he might have stabbed Jonathan. He accompanied her to Jonathan's flat, and law enforcement gained entry to discover Jonathan dead. Daniel then voluntarily surrendered at a police station. The case quickly progressed to Newcastle Crown Court, where prosecutors dismissed Daniel's claim of self-defense as insufficient given the fatal nature of his actions. In December 2018, after just 2 hours of jury deliberation, Daniel Smith was convicted of murder. The bench sentenced him to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 16 years before parole eligibility. In November 2022, a tragic and brutal incident occurred in Rome, Georgia, involving Brandon Christopher Reisner and his longtime friend Aaron William Davis. Reisner, a 23-year-old haunted house scare actor, was charged with the murder and dismemberment of Davis, a 21-year-old recent graduate from Brigham Young University, Idaho. The two had known each other since high school and had maintained a close friendship. On November 11, 2022, Davis visited Reisner's home in Rome en route to Alabama to see his girlfriend. The following morning, Davis's abandoned car was discovered in a local park, leading authorities to Reisner's residence. Investigations revealed that Reisner had fatally stabbed Davis multiple times, disemboweled him, and attempted to conceal the crime by cleaning the scene and burying the body in a shallow grave. Reisner also made efforts to dispose of Davis's vehicle and remove evidence from the crime scene. In June 2024, Reisner pleaded guilty to several charges, including malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and tampering with evidence. During the sentencing, disturbing details emerged, including Reisner's internet searches for cleaning supplies and his creation of violent song lyrics following the murder. He claimed that substance use and delusional thoughts led him to believe he had to commit the act to avoid a worse fate. The court sentenced Reisner to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tanner Robert Ferrell was an 18-year-old from Omaha, Nebraska, whose life was tragically cut short on March 12, 2022. A senior at Ralston High School, Tanner was known for his infectious smile, sense of humor, and deep love for sports, particularly baseball and basketball. He was posthumously awarded his high school diploma and is remembered fondly by his family, friends, and community. On the evening of his death, Tanner was at the home of his longtime friend Blake Miller. The two, along with other friends, were reportedly drinking and handling a rifle when the firearm discharged, fatally wounding Tanner. Miller, who believed the rifle was unloaded, was charged with manslaughter and later sentenced to 4 years of probation. Both families expressed deep grief and a desire to support one another through the tragedy. In honor of Tanner's memory, the Tanner Ferrell Memorial Scholarship was established.